An arranged marriage, dark secrets, and a fight for freedom. See how a young woman saves her family after millions in debt with powerful Arabs. First, don't forget to subscribe to the channel for more exciting love stories like this one. Enjoy the story, everyone! In the luxurious penthouse of one of New York City's most imposing buildings, Alice Anderson contemplated the city through the panoramic windows. Her eyes, usually full of life, now reflected a mixture of sadness and resignation. At 28, this brilliant young woman, full of dreams, found herself at a crossroads that would change the course of her life forever. "My darling, are you listening to me?" The voice of Thomas, her father, brought her back to reality. Seated on the Italian leather sofa, he seemed to have aged 10 years in recent weeks. Beside him, Catherine, Alice's mother, held a handkerchief, her eyes red from crying. Alice turned slowly, facing her parents. "Yes, Dad, I'm listening." Thomas sighed deeply before continuing. "Honey, you know we wouldn't do this if there was any other option. The Khabibs, they're not people to be trifled with. The debts we've accumulated." "I know, Dad," Alice interrupted, her voice surprisingly firm. "You've already explained the situation to me. Millions in debt, veiled threats, the company on the brink of bankruptcy, and the only way out is for me to marry the Khabib heir." Catherine sobbed softly. "Oh, my dear. How I wish things were different." Alice crossed the room and knelt before her parents, holding their hands. "Mom, Dad, I understand. Really. You've always given me everything. Now, it's my turn to fight for you." The silence that followed was interrupted by the sound of the doorbell. Thomas stood up, adjusting the expensive suit that barely disguised his defeated posture. "It must be Michael." Michael Roberts, the family lawyer and Alice's close friend since childhood, entered the room. His eyes immediately sought Alice, a mixture of concern and something deeper in his gaze. "Good afternoon, everyone," he greeted, his voice controlled, but Alice could feel the tension behind his words. "I've brought the agreement documents." Alice stood up, soothing her designer dress. "Let's get this over with. Michael, where do I sign?" Michael hesitated, his eyes slightly pleading. Are you sure? We can still try to find another solution." "There is no other solution, Michael," Thomas intervened, his voice tired. "Believe me, we've explored all options." Alice took the pen Michael reluctantly offered. Her hand trembled slightly as she signed the documents that sealed her fate. With each signature, she felt as if she were closing the doors to her dreams, one by one. Meanwhile, on the other side of the city, in an opulent office decorated with rare artwork and antique furniture, Andrew Khabib observed the city view. At 35, he was the epitome of business success, heir to a royal empire that stretched back generations. Jasmine, his younger sister, entered the room with a tablet in hand. "The girl accepted the deal," she said. Andrew turned his face, a mask of indifference. "Good. Inform our father. He'll be pleased to know we've resolved the situation." Jasmine hesitated, studying her brother. "Andrew, are you okay with this? This arranged marriage? It's not exactly what you've always wanted for your life." For a moment, Andrew faltered, revealing a flash of emotion. "What I want doesn't matter, Jasmine. We have a legacy to protect, expectations to meet. Our father made that very clear." "But what about the other girl? Alice, isn't it? You don't even know her." Andrew turned his attention back to the window. "She made her choice, just as I made mine. We both have duties to fulfill." Back at the Anderson apartment, Alice found herself alone in her room. The walls, once covered with photos of travels and dreams, now seemed empty. She picked up a framed photo from her graduation, recalling the plans she had made for her career as a writer. A soft knock on the door pulled her from her thoughts. "Come in," she called, quickly composing herself. Michael entered, his face a mixture of concern and determination. I know you think there's no other way out, but I promise I'll find a way to get you out of this situation." Alice smiled sadly. "Mike, I appreciate it, but this is my choice. My family needs me." Michael stepped closer, taking her hands in his. "What about your dreams, your writing? Something you've worked for?" Sometimes we have to make sacrifices for those we love, Alice replied, her voice trembling slightly. But what about love? You deserve more than an arranged marriage to a stranger. Alice gently withdrew her hands. Love, Mike? This is real life, not one of my novels. Sometimes we have to be practical. Michael stared at her intently. I won't give up. I'll investigate the Khabibs, find a way to break this contract. I promise I'll free you from this. Before Alice could respond, a commotion was heard from the living room. She and Michael rushed to see what was happening. In the living room, they found Thomas talking animatedly on the phone, while Catherine cried with joy. Yes, I understand. Of course, we'll be there. Thank you very much. Thomas finished the call, turning to the others with a radiant smile. It was Andrew Khabib's assistant, he announced. They want to meet us tomorrow to discuss the details of the arrangement. Alice felt her heart race. The moment she both feared and, at the same time, anticipated had arrived. Tomorrow, she would meet the man who would become her husband, the man who unknowingly carried the weight of saving her family. While everyone around her talked excitedly about the meeting, Alice found herself looking out the window again. Are you okay? Michael's voice brought her back to reality. Alice turned, forcing a smile. Yes, everything's fine. Tomorrow's a new day. But as soon as she said these words, a part of her wondered what future awaited her in the arms of a stranger, and would she have enough strength to face what lay ahead? The next morning, Alice carefully chose an elegant yet modest dress. Her thoughts drifted. What would her life be like from now on? These questions echoed in her mind, unanswered. In the living room, she found her parents already prepared. Catherine nervously adjusted her pearl necklace while Thomas repeatedly consulted his watch. Good morning, darling. Catherine greeted her, her voice trembling with nervousness. Beautiful. Alice forced a smile. Thank you, Mom. Thomas approached, placing a comforting hand on his daughter's shoulders. Remember, Alice, we're doing this for the family. I know it's a big sacrifice. But I know, Dad, Alice gently interrupted him. I've already made my decision. Let's move forward. The journey to the Khabib's office was made in intense silence. Alice watched the city pass by the car window, feeling as if she were saying goodbye to her old life. Upon arriving at the imposing building that housed the headquarters of Khabib Oil, they were greeted by an impeccably dressed receptionist. The Khabibs are waiting for you in the conference room, she informed, guiding them through corridors decorated with modern art and Middle Eastern antiques. When the conference room doors opened, Alice felt her heart skip a beat. There, standing by the window, was Andrew Khabib, tall, with broad shoulders and striking features. Andrew emanated an aura of power and control. His dark eyes met Alice's for a moment. She saw something. Surprise, perhaps, pass through them. Welcome, a female voice broke the moment. Jasmine Khabib, Andrew's sister, stood up to greet them. Please, sit down. As everyone took their seats, Alice couldn't help but notice how Andrew seemed uncomfortable despite his impeccable posture. I believe introductions are unnecessary, Jasmine began, her tone professional. We're here to finalize the details of the arrangement between our families. Thomas nervously cleared his throat. Yes, of course. We are very grateful for your understanding in this situation. Andrew, who had remained silent until then, finally spoke. His voice was deep and controlled. Mr. Anderson, we understand that your company has gone through difficulties. This arrangement will benefit everyone. Alice observed Andrew carefully. There was something in his eyes, a certain reluctance. She wondered if he was as uncomfortable with the situation as she was. And what about the wedding? Catherine asked, her voice trembling slightly. Jasmine smiled. We're planning a discreet ceremony a month from now. Enough time for the necessary preparations. 1 month. Alice felt as if the air had been sucked out of the room. 1 month until her life changed completely. If you'll allow me, Andrew intervened, surprising everyone, I'd like to speak privately with Miss Anderson. There was a moment of tense silence before Thomas nodded. Of course. Andrew gestured toward a side door. This way, please. Alice followed him into a smaller room decorated with the same discreet luxury as the rest of the building. As soon as the door closed behind them, Andrew seemed to relax a little. Miss Anderson, he began, his voice softer now. I want to apologize for this situation. Alice blinked, surprised. Apologize? Andrew nodded, running his hand through his dark hair in a gesture of frustration. This arrangement, it's not ideal for either of us. I want you to know that I have no expectations beyond what is comfortable for you. For a moment, Alice was speechless. This wasn't the cold, calculated man she had expected. I appreciate your consideration, Mr. Khabib. Andrew, he gently corrected. If we're going to get married, I think we can dispense with formalities. Alice nodded, a small smile forming on her lips. Then you can call me Alice. There was a moment of silence between them, not entirely uncomfortable, but laden with unasked questions and unspoken words. Alice, Andrew finally spoke, I know this isn't the life you planned for yourself, but I promise to do my best to make it pleasant. There was a sincerity in his eyes that touched Alice. Thank you, Andrew. I'll try my best too. Meanwhile, outside the building, Michael's heart was heavy. He had followed the Andersons' car, unable to stay put while Alice's fate was sealed. I won't give up, he muttered to himself. I'll find out what these Khabibs are hiding. Back in the conference room, Alice and Andrew returned, both seeming more relaxed than before. Jasmine noticed a subtle change in her brother's posture and raised an eyebrow, intrigued. Well, Thomas said, breaking the silence, it seems we have an agreement. Andrew nodded, his eyes briefly meeting Alice's. Yes, we have an agreement. When they left the building, Alice noticed a familiar figure across the street, Michael. Their gazes crossed for a moment, and she saw the determination in his eyes. She knew he wouldn't give up easily, and a part of her wondered if she should feel grateful or worried about that. In the car on the way home, Catherine held her daughter's hand. Is everything okay, darling? Alice looked at her mother, and for the first time since the whole situation began, felt a spark of hope. Yes, Mom, I think everything will be okay. As the car drove away, Alice didn't notice Andrew's eyes following her from his office window. He watched the vehicle disappear into traffic, a thoughtful expression on his face. 1 month, he murmured to himself. 1 month to find out that this is madness or something more. The weeks following the meeting with Khabibs passed in a whirlwind of preparations and conflicting emotions for Alice. The wedding day was rapidly approaching, and with it, a mixture of anxiety and curiosity grew in her chest. On a Sunday afternoon, Alice found herself in her favorite cafe in Greenwich Village, absent-mindedly flipping through a bridal magazine. The aroma of fresh coffee filled the air, mingling with a buzz of conversation around her. I thought I'd find you here. A familiar voice pulled her from her reverie. Michael pulled up a chair and sat down in front of her, his eyes shining with an intensity Alice knew well. Michael, she smiled, closing the magazine. What are you doing here? Michael hesitated for a moment before answering. I have something to tell you, something about the Khabibs. Alice's heart raced. She knew Michael had promised to investigate the family, but a part of her hoped he had given up. What did you find? Looking around to make sure no one was listening, Michael leaned forward. I've been investigating their business. There's something strange going on. I found evidence of suspicious transactions, obscure contracts with shell companies. Alice frowned. Michael, are you sure about this? These are serious accusations. I know, he replied, running his hand through his hair in a gesture of frustration. I don't have concrete proof yet, but I'm close. You need to be careful. This marriage, it might be more dangerous than we thought. Before Alice could respond, her cell phone vibrated. It was a message from Andrew asking if she would like to have dinner with him that night. She looked back at Michael, feeling torn. Look, Michael, I appreciate your concern, but I need to give this a chance. Give Andrew a chance. Michael seemed to want to argue, but restrained himself. Just be careful, okay? Alice nodded, standing up. I always am. Now, if you'll excuse me, I need to get ready for a dinner. As Alice walked away, Michael watched her, his heart heavy. He knew he needed to continue investigating, not just for the Andersons, but for Alice. A few hours later, Alice arrived at one of the most luxurious restaurants in New York, sitting across from Andrew. The place was an oasis of elegance and privacy, perfect for a private meeting. I'm so glad you accepted the invitation, Andrew said, his gentle smile lighting up his dark eyes. Alice returned the smile, surprised by the ease she felt. I'm glad to be here too. We should get to know each other better before the big day. Andrew nodded, his gaze becoming more serious. Alice, I wanted to talk to you about that. I know our situation isn't conventional, but I want you to know that I respect you and your feelings. Thank you, Andrew. Alice replied, touched by his sincerity. I confess, I was apprehensive at first, but you've been very kind. As they talked, Alice discovered that Andrew was more than just the heir to an oil empire. He was passionate about literature, just like her, and had a surprisingly sharp sense of humor. You know, Andrew began after a pause in the conversation, I've always dreamed of doing something beyond a family business, something meaningful. Like what? Alice asked, intrigued. Clean energy, he replied, his eyes shining with enthusiasm. I've been studying ways to diversify the family business, invest in sustainable technologies. But he hesitated, his smile faltering. Alice encouraged him to continue. Andrew sighed. Not everyone in the family shares this vision. There's resistance. Alice felt a pang of emptiness. She knew well the weight of family expectations. I understand. It must not be easy to go against such deep-rooted traditions. It's not, Andrew agreed. But maybe with the right support. His eyes met hers, a silent question hanging between them. The moment was interrupted by the sound of Alice's cell phone. It was a message from Michael. We need to talk. Urgent. Alice ignored the message, focusing again on Andrew. The night continued, filled with deep conversations and light laughter. When Andrew dropped her off at the home, Alice was surprised to find that he didn't want the night to end. Good night, Andrew said softly, holding her hand at a moment longer than necessary. Good night, Andrew, she replied, feeling an unexpected warmth spread through her chest. Meanwhile, in a small apartment in the city center, Michael worked frantically, surrounded by piles of documents and flickering computer screens. He was close. He could feel it. The pieces of the puzzles were starting to fit together, revealing a picture that made him increasingly worried. I have to tell him, he muttered to himself, rubbing his tired eyes, before it's too late. The sun had barely risen when Alice woke up, startled by a troubling dream she couldn't quite remember. She sat up in bed, running her hands through her tousled hair, trying to organize her thoughts. The last few weeks had been an emotional roller coaster, and she felt she was reaching a crucial turning point. Determined to clear her mind, Alice dressed for a morning run in Central Park. The fresh morning air and the verdant scenery always helped her think better. As she ran, her mind wandered between conversations with Andrew, Michael's warnings, and her family's expectations. It was then she spotted a familiar figure sitting on a nearby bench. Catherine, her mother, seemed lost in thought, a melancholic look on her face. Mom? Alice called, approaching. What are you doing here so early? Catherine looked up, surprised. Oh, Alice! I just needed to think a bit. Alice sat down next to her mother, concerned. Is everything okay? You look sad. Catherine hesitated for a moment before speaking. Darling, there's something I need to tell you. Something about the past, about the Khabibs. Alice's heart raced. What is it, Mom? Years ago, Catherine began, her voice trembling. Before you were born, I knew Farid Khabib, Andrew's father. Alice blinked, surprised. You knew him? Catherine took a deep breath. We were young, idealistic. Farid was in America to study, and we fell in love. It was an intense love, but forbidden. Our families would never approve. Mom, I didn't know. Alice, shocked by the revelation. Nobody knows, darling. Not even your father, Catherine continued, tears shining in her eyes. When Farid had to return to his country, we made a promise. If we ever had children, they would marry, uniting our families. Alice felt as if the ground had disappeared beneath her feet. So, this arrangement, it's not just about money or business, Catherine completed. It's the fulfillment of a promise made long ago. The silence that followed was heavy, laden with unspoken emotions and unanswered questions. Alice tried to process this new information, which cast a completely different light on her situation. Why are you telling me this now? Alice finally asked. Catherine held her daughter's hands. Because I see the way you look at Andrew. It's the same way I had to look for Farid. Alice blushed, surprised that her mother had noticed her emerging feelings. Mom, It's okay, darling. Catherine smiled softly. Love has mysterious ways of manifesting itself. But remember, there's much more at stake here than just our hearts. Alice said goodbye to her mother, promising to keep the secret. Meanwhile, in the Khabib office, her father, Farid, had unexpectedly arrived from an overseas trip. Father, Andrew greeted, trying to hide his surprise. We weren't expecting you so soon. Farid Khabib, an imposing figure even in his mid-60s, observed his son with penetrating eyes. The business in Dubai ended earlier than expected, and I wanted to see how the wedding preparations are going. Andrew nodded, feeling a familiar tension growing in his chest. Everything's on track, Father. Alice and I... Alice? Farid interrupted, a strange glint in his eyes. Andrew frowned, intrigued by his father's reaction. You know her? Farid seemed to quickly recompose himself. Only by name, of course. Andrew, son, I hope you understand the importance of this marriage. It's not just uniting fortunes, but about honoring promises from the past. Before Andrew could question further, Jasmine entered the room, interrupting the conversation. Father, what a wonderful surprise, Jasmine said as she hugged Farid. Andrew couldn't help but notice the significant look his father's cast in his direction. There were secrets there, buried long ago, and Andrew was determined to uncover them. Alice walked back home. Her phone rang. It was Michael. We need to talk. Michael's voice sounded urgent. I've discovered something about the Khabibs that you need to know. Alice hesitated, her heart torn between loyalty to her family and trust in her friend. Mike, I don't know if I want to know. Please, Alice, Michael pleaded. It's important. Meet me at the cafe in an hour. Hanging up the phone, Alice found herself at a crossroads. On one side, her mother's revelations and her feelings for Andrew. On the other, Michael's persistent warnings and secrets that still lingered in the air. Alice made her decision. She would meet with Michael, but not before making an important call. Picking up the phone again, she dialed a number she had already memorized. After a few rings, a familiar voice answered. Andrew, can we meet? There's something we need to talk about. The Grammy Tavern, known for its elegant ambiance and discretion, buzzed with quiet conversation as Alice waited nervously at a corner table. Her fingers tapped in erratic rhythm on the pristine white table, her eyes darting between the entrance and her watch. Andrew arrived precisely on time, his usual composed demeanor slightly ruffled as he sat down across from Alice. Concern etched across his features. Alice, is everything all right? Your call sounded urgent. Alice took a deep breath, steeling herself. Andrew, there's something I need to tell you. It's about our families, about why we're getting married. Andrew's brows furrowed. What do you mean? My mother. She told me about her past with your father, Alice said, watching Andrew's reaction carefully. About their relationship, the promise they made. Andrew's eyes widened in shock. I had no idea. My father never mentioned. So, you really didn't know? Alice asked, a mixture of relief and confusion in her voice. Andrew shook his head, still processing the information. No, my father's insistence on this marriage, the strange look he had when I mentioned your name. As they delved deeper into this revelation, across the street, hidden in a parked car, Michael observed the scene with a mixture of concern and determination. He had arrived early, hoping to speak with Alice before Andrew, but now found himself forced to wait. In his hands, he clutched a thick folder containing the results of weeks of investigations. Documents, photos, financial records, all pointing to the complex web of shady business dealings and questionable decisions involving not just the Khabibs, but also prominent figures in American politics and the business world. Back at the tavern, Alice and Andrew continued their conversation, now in lower, more intimate tones. Andrew, Alice began, hesitant. What does this mean for us? For this marriage? Andrew reached across the table, taking Alice's hands in his eyes meeting hers with intensity. Alice, When this arrangement was made, I saw it only as a duty, but now I see it can be so much more." Alice's heart raced at these words, but before she could respond, the tavern's door bursted open. Michael strode in, his eyes quickly locating Alice and Andrew. "Andrew," he called out, approaching the table with determined steps. "We need to talk now." Andrew stood up, a mixture of confusion and mild irritation on his face. "So, who are you?" "Michael Roberts," he introduced himself, his tone cold. "Alice's longtime friend and the Andersons' family lawyer." Alice stood up as well, feeling the tension grow between the two men. "Mike, what are you doing here?" Michael tossed the folder on the table, scattering some documents. "Showing the truth about the family you're about to marry into," he said. Andrew frowned, picking up one of the papers. His eyes widened as he read the contents. "This can't be true." "Oh, but it is," Michael insisted. "Fraudulent contracts, money laundering, bribes. Your father built an empire on corruption." Alice looked from Michael to Andrew, her world spinning. "Andrew, is this true?" Andrew appeared genuinely shocked and confused. I don't know, Alice. I've never had full access to my father's business dealings. He always kept certain aspects secret." The tavern was now silent. All eyes turned to the drama unfolding. Michael continued, relentless. "And there's more. Your family's debt. It was artificially inflated. The Khabibs manipulated the numbers to force this marriage." Alice felt her legs weaken, fallen back into her chair. "No, it can't be." Andrew, still holding the documents, seemed torn. "I swear, Alice, I knew nothing about this, but if it's true." At that moment, the door opened again. Farid Khabib entered, followed closely by Jasmine. His eyes scanned the scene, landing on the document spread across the table. "What's going on here?" Farid's powerful voice echoed through the room. Andrew turned to his father, the documents in his hands trembling slightly. "Father, what is this? Is this true?" He took a step forward, his expressions a mixture of anger and fear. "Son, there are things you don't understand. Decisions I had to make to protect our family, our legacy." Jasmine, observing the scene, seemed torn between defending her father and the growing doubt in her eyes. Alice stood up, facing Farid. "And what about manipulating my family's debt? About forcing this marriage?" Farid hesitated, his eyes briefly meeting Alice's before darting away. I did what I thought necessary to fulfill a promise to unite our families." "At whose expense?" Andrew questioned, his voice laden with disappointment. The tavern was in complete silence now, the tension palpable in the air. Farid Khabib, a powerful oil magnate, seemed to have aged years in a matter of minutes. Alice, feeling the weight of all the revelations, looked at Andrew. Their eyes met, full of confusion, hurt, but also something more, something that neither lies nor secrets seemed capable of completely erasing. Michael, noticing the connection between the two, stepped forward. "Alice, you can't trust them. All of this was built on lies." But before anyone could respond, the sound of sirens began to echo in the distance, rapidly approaching. Farid paused. "What have you done?" he asked, his voice trembling. For the first time, Michael raised his chin defiantly. "What should have been done a long time ago. Exposed the truth." The sirens were now very close. Andrew looked at Alice, his eyes pleading for understanding. "Alice, I swear I didn't know." Alice, torn between her heart and her reason, between love and the harsh reality of revelations, felt the world spin around her. The choices she would make in the next moment would shape not only her future, but the fate of two families and an empire built on quicksand. As the tavern doors opened once more, giving way to determined police officers, Alice found herself at the epicenter of a storm that threatened to destroy everything she knew. Amidst the chaos, one question echoed in her mind. Who could she really trust? The sound of sirens had faded, but the silence that hung over the police station was almost deafening. Alice sat in a waiting room, her hands trembling slightly as she tried to process the events of the last few hours. Across the hallway, she could see Andrew through a window, talking intensely with a lawyer. Catherine and Thomas arrived hurriedly, their faces marked with concern. "Am I my love?" Catherine exclaimed, embracing her daughter. Is everything okay? What happened? Alice took a deep breath, trying to organize her thoughts. Mom, Dad, everything we thought we knew was a lie. Thomas frowned, confused. What are you talking about, honey? Before Alice could answer, Michael appeared, his face a mixture of determination and exhaustion. Mr. and Mrs. Anderson, I can explain. As Michael detailed his discoveries to Alice's parents, on the other side of the station, Farid Khabib faced his own interrogation. Jasmine observed from afar, her eyes reflecting a mixture of shock and disappointment. Hours passed. Statements were taken, documents analyzed, and the truth, little by little, came to light. The manipulation of the Andersons' family debts, the fraudulent contracts, the network of corruptions that extended far beyond what any of them could have imagined. Alice and Andrew were in the hallway. Their eyes met, full of unspoken emotions. Alice, Andrew began, his voice hoarse. I swear I knew nothing about this. If I had known... Alice raised a hand, interrupting him. Andrew, I need time to think, to understand all this. Andrew nodded, the pain evident in his eyes. I understand, but please believe me when I say my feelings for you are real, regardless of all of this. Before Alice could respond, Michael approached. Alice, are you okay? We need to talk about the next steps. Alice looked from Andrew to Michael, feeling the weight of the choices she would have to make. Not now, Mike. I need to go home. In the days that followed, the media storm was relentless. Reporters surrounded the Anderson mansion in the Habib office, eager for any information. Alice took refuge in her room, avoiding the insistent calls and messages flooding her cell phone. She spent hours recalling every moment, every conversation, trying to understand where the truth ended and the lies began. A week after the incident, Alice finally decided to come out of her isolation. She arranged to meet Andrew in a quiet park, away from the prying eyes of the press. When Andrew arrived, Alice noticed the dark circles under his eyes, the weariness evident in his posture. He sat down beside her on the bench, maintaining a respectful distance. Thank you for meeting me, Andrew said softly. Alice nodded, looking at the horizon. Andrew, I've spent days thinking about all of this, trying to understand. And what did you conclude? He asked, his voice barely disguising the hope and fear. Alice turned to face him. I believe that you didn't know about your father's actions, but that doesn't change the fact that our relationship, was built on lies. Andrew lowered his head, the pain evident in his expression. I know, and I understand if you want to walk away completely. But Alice, what I feel for you, that's real. Alice felt tears form in her eyes. I feel something for you too, Andrew. But how can we build something true on such a fragile foundation? At that moment, Alice's cell phone vibrated. It was a message from Michael. Urgent. New information about the case. I need to see you. Alice sighed and showed the message to Andrew. Things are far from over, aren't they? Andrew nodded, a determined look emerging in his eyes. Alice, I promise you, I'll do everything in my power to correct my father's mistakes, to build something new, something honest. Alice observed him for a moment, seeing the sincerity in his eyes. I want to believe you, Andrew, but it will take time. They stood up, ready to face whatever came next. Before they parted, Andrew gently held Alice's hand. No matter what happens, know that you've changed my life, Alice, and I'll fight for us, if you give me the chance. Alice felt her heart race at these words. She squeezed Andrew's hand lightly before letting go. One step at a time, Andrew. Let's see where this journey takes us. As she walked towards Michael's office, Alice felt the weight of the choices she would have to make. The future was uncertain, full of challenges and potential pitfalls, but for the first time in weeks, she felt a spark of hope on the horizon. The sun began to set, painting the New York sky with shades of orange and pink. It was a reminder that even after the darkest nights, a new day always dawns, bringing with it the promise of new beginnings and second chances. Michael's office was dimly lit by the fading evening light when Alice entered. The young lawyer was hunched over a pile of documents, his face illuminated by the glow of his computer screen. "Alice, I'm glad you came," Michael said, standing up to greet her. "We have a lot to discuss." Alice sat down, feeling the weight of exhaustion from the past few days. "What did you find out, Mike?" Michael picked up a folder and handed it to Alice. "I found evidence that your father, Thomas, wasn't as oblivious to the shady dealings as we thought." Alice felt her heart sink. "What do you mean?" "It seems he had knowledge of some of the questionable transactions. He wasn't directly involved, but he turned a blind eye to a lot of things." The revelation hit Alice like a punch to the stomach. First, the Khabibs, now her own family. How many more lies would she have to unearth? "What do we do now?" she asked, her voice trembling slightly. Michael leaned forward, his eyes full of determination. "We have two options. We can turn this information over to the authorities or what?" Alice encouraged him to continue. "Or we can use this as leverage to negotiate, to clear your family's name, and maybe save what we can of the legitimate businesses." Alice pondered for a moment, the weight of the decision heavy on her shoulders. "I need to talk to my father first. He deserves to know what we've discovered." Meanwhile, at the Habib mansion, Andrew was facing his own battles. Sitting in his father's study, he faced Farid with a mixture of disappointment and determination. "Father, we can't go on like this," Andrew said, his voice firm. "We need to fix this. Do what's right." Farid sighed heavily. "Andrew, you don't understand. The business, our family, and everything we've built was built on lies." Andrew interrupted, slamming his hand on the desk. "And now we have the chance to rebuild, to do something honest." Jasmine, who had been observing the scene from the doorway, finally spoke. "Andrew is right, Father. We can't keep living like this." He looked at his children, seeing in them a strength and integrity he had long lost. Finally, he nodded. "What do you suggest?" The next morning, New York woke up to bombshell news. The newspapers plastered headlines about Khabib Oil announcing a complete restructuring, promising full transparency and cooperation with ongoing investigations. Alice read the news with a mixture of surprise and admiration. Her phone rang. It was Andrew. "Did you see?" he asked as soon as she answered. "Yes," Alice replied, a smile forming on her lips. "I know, it's just the beginning, but it's an important beginning. I have news too, about my family," Andrew said. They arranged to meet in the same park where they had spoken days ago. When Alice arrived, she found Andrew waiting for her, a bouquet of flowers in his hands. "For you," he said, handing her the flowers, a symbol of new beginnings. Alice accepted the flowers, touched by the gesture. They sat down, and she told Andrew about Michael's discoveries, the difficult conversations with her parents, and the decision to seek transparency and reparation. "It won't be easy," Alice concluded. "There will be consequences, maybe even legal ones, but it's the right thing to do." Andrew took her hand, squeezing it gently. "You're amazing. You know that? Your strength, your integrity." Alice felt her heart race. "Andrew, I think I'm ready to give us a chance, a real chance, without lies or obligations." The smile that lit up Andrew's face was radiant. "It's all I want, Alice, to build something true together." In the weeks that followed, New York witnessed an unprecedented transformation. Khabib Oil, under Andrew's leadership, initiated clean energy projects and established reparation funds for communities affected by its past practices. Guided by Alice, they gave up a considerable part of their assets to pay off debts and make donations to social causes. Thomas, although facing possible legal consequences, found redemption in fully cooperating with the authorities. Michael, initially skeptical about Alice and Andrew's relationship, gradually began to see the sincerity in the young businessman's actions. He became a valuable ally in the legal and ethical rebuilding of the companies. On a sunny afternoon, months after the initial scandal, Alice found herself in her old room, now transformed into an impromptu office. Before her, an open laptop displayed the first pages of her novel in progress, a story of love, redemption, and second chances, inspired by her own journey. A soft knock on the door made her look up. It was Andrew, smiling lovingly. "Ready for our date?" he asked. Alice smiled, saving her work before standing up. Always. As they left together, hand in hand, Alice reflected on the journey that brought them here. From lies came truth, from chaos came order, and from what should have been just a business arrangement, true love blossomed. With a cup of coffee in her hands, Alice reflected on the journey that brought her here. Her book, inspired by her own story, had become a bestseller, touching hearts and inspiring people across America. A pair of strong arms enveloped her from behind, and Alice smiled as she felt Andrew's soft kiss on her cheek. "Good morning, my love," he murmured. "Thinking about the big day?" Alice turned in his arms, facing those eyes she now knew so well. "Yes, my love, I've been eagerly waiting for it." The sound of hurried footsteps interrupted the moment. Catherine entered the balcony, her eyes shining with excitement. "Darling, the dress has arrived! Come try it on." Alice laughed, allowing herself to be swept away by her mother's enthusiasm. As she prepared, she couldn't help but think about how things had changed. Thomas, her father, after facing the legal consequences of his past actions, found a new purpose. He now dedicated his time to monitoring young entrepreneurs about business ethics, turning his mistakes into valuable lessons for others. Farid Khabib, initially resistant to change, surprised everyone by becoming a staunch advocate for corporate transparency. His journey of redemption inspired many of the business world to rethink their practices. And then came the happiest day of Alice's life. The officiant began the ceremony with words that touched all those present. "We are gathered here to celebrate not just the reunion of Alice and Andrew, but also the extraordinary journey that brought them to this moment. A journey of overcoming, of discoveries, of forgiveness, and above all, of true love." Alice and Andrew exchanged emotional vows. When the officiant declared them husband and wife, the explosion of joy and applause echoed through the garden. At that moment, seeing the joy on everyone's faces, Alice felt a deep sense of peace and fulfillment. "You know," she said, turning to Andrew, "I think I finally understand the true meaning of happily ever after." "And what would that be?" Andrew asked, curious. "It's not about everything being perfect all the time," Alice explained. "It's about choosing love, honesty, and forgiveness every day. It's about building something beautiful together, even when the path is difficult." Andrew smiled, pulling her closer. "Then, my love, let our happily ever after begin." What do you think of Matthew and Alice's story? Share your thoughts in the comments below. Rate this story on a scale from 0 to 10. And don't forget to subscribe to the channel and turn on the notification bells to follow all our stories.